There we go. So my name is Zuri Dale, and I am in the Division of Research and Innovation. I serve as our Assistant Vice President of Research and Innovation, but I'm also a TSU alum. I am a TSU alum. I'm a proud TSU alum, actually. And I also teach. I teach an epidemiology course this semester. Maybe a few of my students on the call. I'm not sure if you are here. Hello, if you're one of my students in my epidemiology class, just say hello. But I wanted to just welcome you all. And so I want to first know before we start, drop in the chat. Just give me an idea of your classification, faculty, staff, student. And if you're a student, are we graduate student? Are we undergraduate student? Just kind of drop in the chat before we start. Oh, undergrad, first year grad student. Hey, Miss Rhonda, Miss Harrison. Grad student. Okay. Cameron, I can't tell whether you're undergrad or undergraduate student. Cameron, oh, graduate student. Okay. Okay, great. All right, great. Let's get started. So, the reason why we are having this webinar is for one, because we wanted to make sure that we were providing more support to students who may need it. Also, if you're a faculty member or a staff member, thank you, Ojo. If you're a faculty member or a staff member, you may have been in a situation where you are presenting at a conference, right, or a meeting, and you're asked for an abstract. So, as Research and Innovation Week is approaching, it is actually, I'll announce those dates. It's at the end as well, March 27th through the 31st of 2026. We wanted to provide some additional support in hopes that you all will sign up for Research and Innovation Week. If you have any questions as we go throughout this, please feel free to ask. Your question. All right, so I want you to think about the very last time that you were looking for an article for your class. And I want you to think back, right? Maybe you get on Google Scholar, maybe you went to the library to get a research article. And I want you to ask yourself, did you actually read the entire paper, or did you just skim it, right? To decide if it was worth your time. So just think about that, right? I'm doing some research. I have a paper, I have a grant. Maybe you're a faculty or staff member. And are you reading the whole thing, or are you generally just skimming? Let's see, what are we saying here? And please feel free to come off mute. It is perfectly fine if you come off mute. Generally, would you be skimming or reading the whole thing?
Most of the time, I just skim, like, especially if I have to cite a source or something like that, when you have to, like, when you have multiple options of something and you don't have a lot of time to, like, choose
Yeah.
what specifically you need to pick.
Cameron, that's a funny one. It's like, let me scan for the sources, right? Or like I'm reading something else and it's telling me that they got this source from this other article. I'm not even reading the article. I'm really just going to the article to try to find the source, right? Like, okay, where did they mention this? That is absolutely like a real thing. Most of us rely on the abstract first. When I'm looking for a study and I'm trying to determine if this is something that I want to give more attention to, I generally read the abstract, not even necessarily the introduction or the background, but the abstract, because that's going to give me a clearer picture of the entire research. Well, reviewers are going to do the same thing. Reviewers are going to, and when I say reviewers, that could be of your a grant, that could be of a person who is trying to determine whether or not Cameron is going to come and present at their conference. They're doing the same thing. They're not reading your full research paper, but you have to know that the abstract is actually not a summary of your work. It's not a summary. Very often we treat the abstract like it just summarizes our papers or summarizes our work. Really, the abstract is your first impression. It is the determining factor that determines if a person, oh, that is so true, if a person wants to continue to engage with your work. And like Ms. Harrison has stated, is that if you like the article, you actually may use that article as the basis for other articles, right? So when I'm working on something, generally, if I could find one good article, I can use that one good article for my entire literature review, because now I want to look at who did they cite, right? And I'm using that one good paper to help me find other papers. So the abstract is going to be your first impression. And a lot of times it is the only impression that you have to make, the only one. All right, so an abstract. So it's a concise summary of your research, but it is a very specific type of summary. It's not a general summary, right? You can't just be on there talking about anything. It is a very specific summary of your work. And I'm going to tell you exactly what the research should include, and we'll go through some case studies. Typically, you're asked about 150 to 300 words because remember, the reviewer is really just trying to skim to determine if this is work that they want to further engage with. What your abstract should do is tell the reader what they can expect if they were to come to your full presentation or your full talk. So it's going to help the reviewer decide if your project fits a conference or a journal. It's going to attract people to your work and it really sets the tone for the full presentation. So if I were to go to a conference, if I were to go to some sort of scientific exposition. I'm an infectious disease epidemiologist by training, and I tend to prefer to engage with biostatistics, any data analysis. I prefer infectious diseases. So I may say, you know what, I want to look at the infectious disease abstract. Is there anything that stands out to me? I also extensively study COVID, depending upon how long you've been around TSU. You may know that I also served as our COVID czar subject matter expert for COVID-19. So I may want to go and just look at the abstracts that have to do with COVID. Now, this is where it gets a bit specific. There are two types of abstracts. There are descriptive abstracts, and those are ones that just summarize the purpose, the scope, and the methods, but it does not give you results, right? Those are for projects where sometimes I see people use descriptive abstracts when they feel as though they still want to present, but the research is not complete, right? I feel as though I don't have any results that I want to present. Whereas the second type of abstract is the informative one. That one is going to include the purpose, the results, the conclusion, and the methods. Now, for research type presentations, we focus on abstracts that are more informative versus descriptive, right? So informative versus descriptive. So not so if you look at the difference between the two, the determining factor is whether or not your abstract is going to include some sort of results. And when I say results, those results can also be preliminary. Very often people are afraid to report preliminary results, right? Or they feel like if I was not the original author of the work, I should not be presenting on the work. There is some research that is literature review, right? You may be working on a research project, Ola, and it involves you doing literature review on a specific topic. You may not have collected the data, right, and analyzed the results, but you can still present on the results of your literature review. And very often, that is the piece that gets left out. So let's talk about the structure of an abstract that is going to be effective. First, you're going to want to make sure that you have a background. And I'm going to go into these a bit more in depth so you'll have an opportunity to take more notes. You want to talk about your methods. What did you do? Your results, which is what did you find? And your conclusion is in the greater scheme of things, why does it matter? And it's this slide that kind of underscores why an abstract is not just a general summary of your work, right? Your abstract is very specific. It has some very specific sections. So let's start to break it down. In your background, you first want to state the topic and why that topic is important. Secondly, if at all possible, you want to mention the gap that your research is seeking to address. It's typically advisable to have this information at the beginning because you really want to spark interest and get the attention of the reviewer. This section is also where you are going to state, and typically we advise that you choose one, either what you hypothesized, what your research question was, or the purpose, Okay. Now we recognize, depending upon what the research is, there may not be a hypothesis, right? But there should at least be a research question or a purpose. So you want to state the topic and why it's so important. You want to mention the gap that your work is attempting to address. And you want to, at this point, state whether or not there's a hypothesis, a research question, or a purpose. Now, for this, you really want to leave this about 1 to 2 sentences. And to be honest, about 2 sentences is probably going to be sufficient for this. It's probably going to be difficult to get all of this information in one very well thought out sentence with academic voice. So you want to, probably 2 sentences is going to be just enough to get all of this information out. Second is the methods. This is the piece that I really want to hit on, because sometimes, let me stop. Let me ask you all this. Can you all drop your majors in the chat, or what you all are studying? I want to gauge where the disciplines in the chat. So are you College of Education? Are you pharmaceutical sciences? Maybe you're in COSET. What are your majors, please? Majors or field of study? Urban planning, okay. Legal education, okay. Public administration, health communication, law. Okay, got it. This is actually great. And the reason why I wanted to ask this question, I am a person who is in the hard sciences. I am a science and math kind of girl. I'm in STEM. But very often, I think that there's a bit of a bias towards the STEM fields without, um, sometimes as much consideration for like the humanities and the social sciences. And very often, if it's not on the bench or in a lab, people believe that it's not research. That is not true. Anytime you are collecting data, anytime that you are trying to generate new ideas, anytime you are trying to explore any topic more in depth, that is considered to be research. And so this plays a large role in the methodology section, because sometimes people feel, well, I don't have any methods. I wasn't in a lab. I don't have any methods. But that's actually not true, because your methods may be participants that you talk to, interviews, key informant interviews. It could be a focus group. Your method could also be a data source. I really like this one, because for individuals who are doing research and their research involves analyzing someone else's original research, then your methodology or your would be mining or data mining data sources that already exist. You may not have collected it yourself, but you analyzed it because it existed. Any tools, it could be a survey tool or just a study design. There's going to be another webinar that we have on different types of study designs that I think may be helpful, different types of observational studies, and based upon some of your majors, observational studies may be more in line with your work opposed to experimental studies. I see environmental toxicologists, I see a chemist in here where their work may be a bit more experimental, but for some of our other colleagues, public administration, administration of justice, legal education, public affairs, your methodology is probably going to be more observational in nature. So we'll be having another conversation, and that may really, really help guide some of your work, especially if you all are graduate students. What you want to do in your method section is tell us what you did. Mention what the design was, whatever that was, and how did you analyze the information that you collected. So that could be a person naming that they used a data set from the CDC and they analyzed it doing this. That is still very much a method in communicating what you did to answer that original research question. You want to keep it brief but specific. Very often in this section, I see first I went to this, and second I got on this site, third I did this. And that's not exactly the way that you want to communicate your methodology. You're not trying to give us a recipe or a list, right? A 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What you're trying to do is give us a very concise explanation of your study design and how you analyze that information. Your results is going to provide us information on what did you find. This one is interesting because what did you find, even with that being very clear, very often individuals will kind of go off on a tangent in this section. You just state the facts. And something about the facts is that the facts may not be what you expected. Very often, and I'll pick on Victor. Victor is a chemist. Victor is running an experiment. Victor did not get the results that he thought that he was going to get. So Victor says, well, I don't have results. You actually do have results. It was just results that you may not have expected. You state the facts. And the determining factor of whether or not research was good is not whether or not it was what you expected. That doesn't determine good research, right? What determines good research is your methods, your experimental design, your study design, and the results are just what they are. I remember, a couple of years ago, and please feel free to chime in or comment on anything, or if you would like to raise your hand or come off mute, I would really appreciate that if that's what you would like to do. So I remember with COVID-19, a really good example is that one of my roles was I was responsible for tracking, right, our data across campus. And there were some days when we just would not have any positive test results. And I hate to say this, but as a scientist, I almost got disappointed. I'm like, wait a minute. And just as much as I know that COVID-19 was devastating, and I know that we did not want to have COVID, when we would not get what I thought was good data at the time, I would be disappointed because in my mind, it's like, well, if we have some data, then we can put interventions in place and we can do all of these things. But if no one was positive that day, they just were not positive that day. And so it really taught me that we have to just state the facts as they are. We can't make them be necessarily what we may want them to be for whatever reason. In my case, certainly I did not want anybody to have COVID, but I think I also knew that COVID existed on our campus. People just weren't testing. And I wanted to find it. I wanted so badly to find the COVID-19 because if we found it, then maybe we can stop it. But the reality is that we don't get to choose. We don't get to decide, right? We do the methods. We set up a very sound experimental design and we just state the facts as they are at that moment. And if we want to explain or give context to why our results are what they are, we do that in another section of our research, perhaps in our limitations. But this would not be where we do that. The research is where we just state exactly what the facts are. Something else is that even if your data is preliminary, that is valuable. You still report on the main outcomes. It could be that Rhonda, Ms. Harrison says, well, I actually am not ready to report on this. I'm still in the process of trying to gather all of my data. I'm not ready to report on this. But you can still summarize some of the main outcomes, even if you don't want to give data that's too specific to research that is not complete. And it's this that's going to separate your abstract from being descriptive or informative. Because a true informative abstract is going to have some outcomes for the reader to just kind of chew on. Now, about the results, as much as possible, you want to use data. You want to use statistics. You want to use parameters as much as you possibly can. Is there a percentage? Is there a comparison? Is there a key trend that you can extrapolate and share with the reader or the reviewer? And then there's the conclusion. What does all of this mean, right? How do those results contribute to the field or the community? It's actually not enough to just say, I got these results. What's more important is how these results contribute to the field or the community. And as a person who has experience both on the bench, which is in the lab, and more public facing, as I've grown in my career, that has become more and more important to me, right? Because we could do research on the bench all day, right? We could try to develop drugs. We're trying to develop vaccines. We're trying to, and I'm not sure, Victor, what you may be doing in chemistry. I'm not exactly sure what you could be over there creating in chemistry and Ojo, environmental toxicology. I don't know. Perhaps you are looking at wastewater and volatile organic compounds in wastewater, or perhaps you were taking samples and you're analyzing air samples, right, in some analytical lab. None of that matters if it does not benefit the community. And sometimes when we're doing the research, we don't think about that. It's almost as if we're doing the research for ourselves, right? But none of the research or the work matters if it does not benefit the communities that we are trying to serve. I can create vaccines all day on the bench, but the vaccine does not mean anything if a person, Keisha, hey Keisha, if Keisha does not take the vaccine. What does it mean? I've been on the bench all this time. Keisha won't even take the vaccine. Maybe Keisha does not believe in being vaccinated. Keisha, I'm picking on you. I don't know. That is definitely your prerogative. I'm picking on you. But the work that we do really does not matter unless it is benefiting the community or contributing to a gap or supporting the current research. Our role as researchers, as scientists, whether we're social scientists, whether we're infectious disease scientists, is to contribute to the body of knowledge. That's our role. And sometimes we do research that supports what's already out. And then sometimes we do research that gives us a novel discovery. And sometimes we do research that is just a new approach to do the same thing that somebody else is already doing. Perhaps Victoria Tran, how are you? Victoria, I don't see your major. I would love to know your major. Perhaps Victoria is looking to, oh, Victoria, you're a graduate student. I don't see your major. But Victoria is looking to find another way to synthesize DNA, right? Maybe she's looking for that. So it's not necessarily a new concept, but she's looking for a new way to do something that already exists. So when you're thinking about your conclusions, you have to know that the work that we are doing does not really mean much unless it is serving our communities, unless it is filling gaps in research and looking at problems in a creative way. So I actually want to go through some case studies now. And this is the part where I would really prefer that you all come off mute, raise your hand if you would like. We're going to talk through some of these, and based upon the parameters that we've set, we're going to talk about whether or not these are good examples or poor examples of abstracts. So let me give about 45 seconds to read this first case study. So you guys can kind of read that separate on your own. Take about 15 more seconds. All right, so let's talk about it. Let's talk. So can somebody come off mute and talk to me about this abstract? Is this strong or is this not? Or is this not strong? Just anybody can kind of come off mute. Got Isaiah, Chanel, Tamaya, Evan, Princess. Would anybody like to come off mute and talk about whether we think that this is strong or not?
I think it's kind of basic. I think it needs to be a little bit stronger in the beginning, though.
Okay, so you're speaking about the background piece.
Mm-hmm.
So the access to clean water, etc. Honestly, I actually agree with you, Cameron. Do you have anything else?
Um, Not at the moment. That's really the thing that kind of stood out to me.
Okay, perfect. So let's actually talk about this one. This one is actually interesting because you made a very interesting point. So, does it have a background? Yes. Access to clean water is essential. Um, this pilot study assessed water quality from 5 drinking fountains across TSU. It does have a background. It's there. Does it have methods? Yeah, it tells us samples were collected and analyzed for pH. Does it have results? It does. Results are there. pH and chlorine levels were within safe ranges. One thing that these results don't have is that it does not really have any parameters or statistics, not really any percentages there. And then, does it have a conclusion? Sure. These findings highlight the need for regular monitoring. Future studies could expand sampling. Does it have all of the components? It does. Is it the strongest? It is not. You are correct, Cameron. It's actually not the strongest example. I definitely think the background could have been more compelling. It did not really hook the reader as much. I think that the methodology could have been built out a bit more. I feel as though for the methodology, it lacks how many samples, right? It does not really tell us where the water fountains were located. It doesn't give us any insights into whether these are public use water fountains, where they are. And I think that the conclusion, these findings highlight the need for regular water quality to ensure student safety. I'm not exactly sure that that's the most compelling way to justify the need for this work, right? Like, surely there's a bit more compelling evidence that we can give for why we need to do water quality sampling type of work. Do we agree or disagree? Drop in the chat. Agree, disagree, let me know your thoughts. Agree. Thank you, Chanel. Chanel, would you like to take the next one for us? Cameron, agree. Chanel, I'm going to move on to the second case study. Let's all read it. But Chanel, if you're available to come off mute in about 30 seconds, can you talk us through the second one? All right, let's take about 15 more seconds. Oh, you cannot speak. That's no problem. Thank you for commenting. Is there anybody, maybe Miss Harrison, that wants to come off mute? Steven. Hey, Pink. Pink, I didn't realize you were on here. Is there anyone that wants to come off mute and kind of talk us through this one? Cashmere.
I can talk us through this one if y'all can hear me.
Sure. Hi, Isaiah. We can hear you.
Hi, y'all. So this one to me doesn't seem that strong because it uses a lot of vague language. Like sometimes it says students are stressed and sometimes need help. Um, it does say the method that they use with the interviews and surveys, but it
Mhm.
doesn't talk too much about it. The background's pretty brief. It doesn't really say what the scope of the study is, really, just kind of what they're looking at. Um, and then they do have founding findings, but again, that's kind of vague too, because they use just the language that they use isn't very definitive.
That is actually correct. That was very good. So let's see. All right. For one, does it have what they think is a background? This project is about mental health in students. Sure. It's just not good, which is why I put a line through it. It talks about how students are stressed and sometimes need help. For one, I think that the writing is poor. It does not tell us, it tells us a little bit about the study and what the study was about. Um, it does tell us that it was an interview and survey based, but it doesn't give us much information. How many interviews, how many surveys? and the results, we found out that students have different feelings about mental health and want more support. That's not quantified at all. It's not telling us what their feelings are about. Um, it doesn't tell us what their feelings are about the different aspects of mental health. Are we talking about anxiety? Are we talking about depression? What exactly are we talking about? This is important because mental health matter and more needs to be done. That's just not strong at all. That's not compelling at all. That does not at all tell us why it is important that we study this work. Now let's look at this second example. I'll get right into this one. Take a moment and review this one. This second example builds upon case study number 2. And I want you all to take a look at this one and tell me, and just note some of the differences. So mental health challenges are common among first-year students, yet many do not seek support. That is stronger. This qualitative study, so it tells us that the study is qualitative. So that alone lets us know that it probably was some type sort of interview focus group, and that the interviews were conducted with 10 first-year students at TSU. So that gives us more information. In the methods, it actually tells us what they did with the data. They transcribed it and analyzed it, and they gave us an overview of the themes that emerged. So while this one doesn't have numerical data, it does give us an overview of the themes. And when you look at the results, it talks about how improving communication about services and training may increase help-seeking behaviors among new students. What I like a lot about this result is that this result is not necessarily specific to students at TSU or students at U of H. Based upon their research, they were able to make a generalization and an inference about how mental health support may support all new students. And this is what we like because this really contributes to the growing body of work in this area. Here's one on obesity in the Black community. This is actually not a great example. I want you all to just review it. And I think at this point, we know that this one is not strong. While this one has an introduction and like a background, and it actually has some results, it does not have any methodology or it has conclusion, I'm sorry. It does not have any methodology or any results at all. So this one is actually missing information. Case study 5 was actually a better example as well. It highlights most, if not all, of the components of the abstract. This one has a bit of it was able to kind of quantify the increase. What makes this one stronger, instead of saying post-intervention results showed an increase, it quantified the increase. It tells us that it's 40% versus the other one that was an okay example. It did not exactly quantify those outcomes. Actually, I'll jump to case study number 8. This is actually long, a bit longer. This is one of my abstracts. I'll share this one because I want to share an example of one that not only hits the components, but it also utilizes some academic voice in the way that it is written. And it does a really good job of reporting on the results. I'll give about 15 more seconds. All right, so long COVID, known as, has emerged. This study aimed to explore the second part that talks about the methodology. It talks about it being a secondary analysis. It talks about, good question, Liana, if I'm not saying your name right, please forgive me. I'll address that just one moment. It talks about not just what we did, but it talks about how many households, where were we located, how did you collect the data. It gave a little bit of insight into the variables. It talked about how some of the variables were coded. It also talked about the modeling that was done on the data to identify those associations. It then gets into risk factors. What is some of the data? I could not report on everything, but this is some of the high level data that a reviewer may be most interested in. It may be impossible to report on every single thing that happened in your study. And then it provides a conclusion and what the findings underscore and what the findings also suggest. So while this study took place in Third Ward at these households, you're able to take your data and generalize it to the broader community. And that's what we are trying to do. For an abstract, to be honest, an abstract, most of the time, the governing body or whoever is requesting the abstract, they are going to tell you how long the abstract should be. I would not submit an abstract that's over 350 or 400 words. At the point that a reviewer feels like they're reading a thesis or a dissertation, they're probably not going to read it because it's too long. So about 400 words or less, so maybe anywhere from about 250 to 400, depending upon what they say. And you want to be careful about that word limit, because if you submit an abstract and it is longer than the word limit, they may use that to disqualify your abstract. So they may use it as a qualifier. All right, it's too long. We may as well not even consider this one because it does not meet the qualifications. Right. So tips, that brings us right into this next tip. Stick to the word limit. Failing to stick to that word limit will and can disqualify you from whatever opportunity you are seeking to explore. You also want to avoid jargon. By jargon, that's unnecessary words that do not contribute. Every word needs to count. Also, in terms of tense, you want to write in the past tense generally if your study has already been completed. If your study is ongoing, you can write in the past tense, but note that the study is ongoing. You want to be clear and you want to be specific. So common mistakes, and we saw that in some of the examples, is just being too vague. Sometimes also, in order to increase the word limit, instead of increasing it with the meat, which may be the methodology or the results, we find that individuals will add more to the background. The abstract is not a literature review. So if you are looking to increase, you probably would want to increase in the methodology or the results section, the actual meat of the work. Also, a very, very, very common miscue is forgetting the results, not adding those results to the abstract, even if they're preliminary, and then adding citations and detailed references. Your abstract does not need citations. So, couple of tips. Asking yourself, does each sentence add value? If it's an unnecessary sentence, it needs to be taken out. Reading it out loud, how would it sound to someone else? Does this use academic voice? Is it professional language? Or is this the way I would be speaking with my friend? And then always have a peer or mentor review it before you submit. So be concise and stick to your word limit. Always add results, even if preliminary. Write clearly and specifically, and revise. The first draft is never your best one. It's never your best one. And I will stop there for any questions. Oh, what is that? I'm not sure why that's doing that. That looks crazy. So let's stop really quickly. Let me stop sharing. And I want to take questions from you all. We have a few minutes left for some questions. And I want to take some of those questions. I see somebody just came in at the end. Are there any questions that I can answer?
One quick question that I had, and thank you for this presentation. It's been very nice. I had a question. My Zoom was having trouble getting in here. Are you going to email the recording or is it going to be uploaded somewhere? I think I saw the meeting was recorded.
Oh, that's a good question. It is recorded and I can email it. So a couple of things. I'm either going to email it or I will add it to the Division of Research and Innovation webpage. Either way, you will get it, Isaiah. And if you do not get it within the next day or so, send me an email. But I did record it, and I just need to figure out the best way to get it out. Okay. But if you want it before you get a notification from me, then you can just contact me and I'll make sure that you get that. Okay. Some of you might be here for class and you might need, I do understand that. All right. Anybody else? Please feel free to just come off mute.
I had sent mine in the chat, but yes, thank you for this presentation. And I was wondering, like, when you are explaining your steps and you're trying to avoid using like I did this, I did that, like how do you avoid that?
That's a good one. And because you don't want to say I did, right? So instead of saying first I went to the water fountain and then I collected 20 meals, you would just say 20 meals of water was collected from the water fountain. We know that you did it. That's the assumption. Does that make sense? Like you don't have to say I got on Google Scholar and search articles. You would say after a in-depth literature review, 20 articles met the criteria. The assumption is that you did it. Does that make sense? You don't have to tell us that you did it. You're presenting it. So the assumption is that you did it. And to the reader, we're assuming that you did the work. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
And so instead of saying things like my results was, you would say results included, or you would just start talking about it. 20% of the water fountains contained. So that's what I mean by leaving out the jargon. The jargon isn't necessary, right? At the point that you're telling us, and I'm going to ask that you all stay on here because I want you all to complete a quick survey for me, please, please, please. At the point that you're telling us about the work, when you start saying 20%, okay, there's the survey. If you all could complete that, is that Sharon? At the point that you're telling us, we know at this point that you've done the work. Just present the data. Volatile organic compounds were found in 30% of our samples. You don't have to say, after I analyzed the data. We know that you analyzed it. That's the only way that you would know, right? That's how many were found. Yes, Ojo, you want to avoid I did. We know that you did it. We're writing an academic voice, guys. Now, when you were in elementary, and I'm not saying that facetiously, we were taught that when you're writing your steps, be as descriptive as possible. First I, second I, third I. But when you're writing with academic voice, you actually don't want to do that. We understand that a step had to come first. Yes, Victor. Thank you, Miss Griffin. Thank you, Miss Harrison. I really appreciate you. I want to address Cameron's question, and because I have this up, you all can see my screen. If you all can do the QR code, that'll be great. And I'll answer this very last question. In terms of words to avoid, that one, it's so funny. Had we not been in the landscape that we were in right now, I might not have as much of an answer for that. Words that you definitely want to avoid: first I, second I, third, right? You don't need to use words like in conclusion. You know how you may draft like a thesis paper or like a research report? You don't need to use those transition phrases, right? You just write. You don't need to use those transitions. In conclusion, I just state the conclusion. However, depending upon if this is a grant, the agency, you might want to be careful with the utilization of certain words: health disparity, women, gender, race, only because of the political landscape that we're in and what agencies are funding right now. We've seen a lot of that. So it just depends on whether or not you're submitting this abstract to a conference for a presentation, or are you submitting this for a grant. And it has been situations where certain verbiage has gotten the grant disqualified based upon the abstract. It spoke too much language that the grant was not willing to fund. That is going to be specific to that agency. So that's something to keep in mind. Generally, for student presentations at conferences, you will not run into that. But if you're on the call and you're applying for a grant, that is very possible. Thank you all so much for attending this. My name is Zuri Dale. And if you all ever want to contact me, if you ever want to try to, you're welcome, Pink. If you ever want me to read over your work, please do. I also encourage you all to sign up for Research and Innovation Week. If you're done with the survey, you can go ahead and go. We are accepting abstracts for that, and I really look forward to a lot of your work and seeing some of your research work. I'm available to you for any of your needs. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Pink. Victor, I'll get that out. Thank you to everybody. Thank you for your participation. Thank you, Isaiah. I'm going to leave this up for 10 more seconds. Thank you. Thank you, Ojo. Thank you, Trevicia. Thank you, Cameron. Yes, Tandria, I will get that out to you. Thank you, Victoria. Oh, thank you, Evan. Thank you, Miss Harrison. Let them know. Complete that survey. I need all the data points. I may want to make me an abstract. That was funny. That was a joke. That was really right. Fill out the survey. Fill out the survey. I have it up for 5 more seconds. Thank y'all. Oh, thank you, Cashmere. You're not even a TSU student. Okay, good. But please feel free to still email me, okay? I'm more than willing to assist. I'll leave it up. Thank you, guys. Hey, Miss Blackie. I didn't see your name at first. You're welcome. You're welcome, Chanel. Thank you. Thank you, Colin.